Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Spearfield7. Today bringing you a good old-fashioned Call of Duty commentary. It's been a while since I've said anything about the franchise because quite frankly there isn't really a lot worth saying. You know, it's kind of like when Grandma says if you don't have something nice to say, you don't say anything at all. So this past year I found a silver lining, however, and I have Call of Duty to thank for that. It allowed me to try out new games and experiences because Infinite Warfare was deleted from my system within a month of release. The announcement of Call of Duty World War II excited me greatly and felt like a great fan service to take us out of the future and place us back into a chapter of world history that hasn't been explored in much depth this console generation. This past year has been Modern Warfare Remastered for me as I've been able to play the game thoroughly and just see how far the franchise has fallen. The campaign still holds up well to this day, and the multiplayer, while very simplistic, adopts the easy to pick up, difficult to master ethos of the most successful and addicting games. I mean, it's easy in that the weapon selection is limited, the score streaks are static, but the amount of head glitches and strategic positioning on most maps requires one to use their head in game for the first time in several titles. So next on deck in the developer cycle is Sledgehammer Games, which has vowed to return Call of Duty to its roots. But I'm afraid that Sledgehammer Games doesn't know what that means, and I've seen several reports that confirm this claim. In my opinion, they are snakes in the grass, but I'm hopeful that the title arriving in the fall is a good one and can change my opinion. First of all, Sledgehammer Games was the first entry into the failed 3-year experiment of moving the franchise into a futuristic territory with Advanced Warfare, a game which I admittedly liked at first. However, after a month or so, the Advanced Movement's novelty wore off and I found the hit registration issues and its boring selection of maps to be pretty disappointing. Now, as we all know, Advanced Warfare was a response to Call of Duty Ghosts, which was almost universally panned, but not for reasons that they anticipated. The reason Ghosts failed was an absurd campaign which required you to go into outer space and fire your guns, and some sort of weird apocalyptic sort of storyline that nobody really bought into. The aesthetic was bland and somber, and the hit detection in multiplayer was actually good for the first time, so unskilled players who had once hid behind their atrocious Wi-Fi actually were punished by faster reflexes and snap-on accuracy. Nevertheless, the title before it, Black Ops 2, was one of the most successful franchises Call of Duty has released, and still has a massive player base to this day, with its bright, colorful aesthetic, good maps, and good weapon variety. These are all reasons why Treyarch is the preferred development team among the three amigos. Their games are always just fun, which is important, and not a frivolous identity for a video game. But getting back to the Sledgehammer point, they were the first to roll out microtransactions as a response to a declining player base. When less people buy the game, Activision makes less money, and so DLC content is pushed to the user to bolster revenue. I mean, I totally get it. They also were the first to introduce weapon variants, another poison for the multiplayer experience, which instead of being merit-based is generally tied to your money. If you have the extra money to play the lottery, you can forego the typical experience of the COD grind and unlock everything your heart desires. I felt like the whole move to futurism that was started by Sledgehammer was a calculated move to compete with emerging franchises like Titanfall and Destiny. However, I think the clan of developers for Activision misread the temperature of the community. It's not that we weren't bored with the Call of Duty formula. We were bored with the laziness and stagnation that had crept into these games on the part of the teams making them. But nevertheless, someone at Activision licked their finger and put it in the air to see which way the wind would blow and said, let's go to the future. And I worry with World War II they're doing the same thing, hopping on the back of the massive following of Battlefield 1, which was received warmly by its community when announced. It seems Call of Duty is only interested in following the crowd these days, which is absurd and sort of ironic because the early COD titles laid the groundwork for all first-person franchises we find today, especially in the multiplayer dimension. Call of Duty has serious identity issues that I'm somewhat pessimistic about being resolved in this year's title. So one of the things that had me scratching my head is the fact that Michael Condrey has confirmed female characters in COD World War II multiplayer. First of all, I find this to be slightly offensive, and kind of a troubling sign of our social climate, but that's another video. First off, they didn't need to do that to appease the, 200 women who play Call of Duty? This move shows not only a tactless view of Call of Duty's prime demographic, which is typically, 13 to 25-year-old males, it shows a casual disrespect towards history. World War II was an actual military engagement that existed, it killed millions of people, and while I'm sure there are a few females who made it onto the battlefield in medicinal capacities or perhaps some Russian female soldiers, I hardly think they were running around with an LMG taking on the Axis powers. I find it to be kind of a disgusting, warped misrepresentation of history, and it just really kind of bums me out. And just as a kind of a side note, remember when I said Sledgehammer was kind of like snakes in the grass? That's how I feel kind of about males who consider themselves feminists. You're acting like a feminist because that's the only way you think you can get pussy, because you can't compete as a regular red-blooded man. But I digress. The most recent news is that the developers have seemed to have indicated that Create a Class system is out, replaced with sort of operator divisions that will have their own preset classes. Once again, this is a completely and utterly stupid idea. I think Create a Class is an important dynamic to the experience, and this will not go over well in practice. Not to mention that Create a Class set the groundwork for an entire genre of multiplayer first-person shooters that everyone else uses in their game now. I mean, it used to be that Call of Duty set the tone for everyone else, but more and more it seems like they're more interested in following the crowd. But I'm sure there will be some sort of great option to purchase COD points so your soldier can wear a red bandana instead of a green one around your neck. Once again, Call of Duty has serious identity issues. I mean, ultimately, bottom line, I think they just seem bored with the franchise. And Sledgehammer is, once again, an unfortunate quote-unquote first victim to returning COD to its roots. But I don't find any evidence that they know what that means, what it actually means to take Call of Duty back to its roots. And I'm skeptical that they will act on something that brings equilibrium to the consumers and longtime fans of Call of Duty. That's all I got today, guys. If you enjoyed this video or it gave you something to chew on or think about, please remember to rate and subscribe. But more importantly, I want to know what you think. Please leave a comment down below, and maybe we can start a discussion and talk about some of our issues with the franchise and maybe possible solutions going forward. I hope you guys have a really lovely rest of your day, and until next time, this is Spearfield7. See you later.